So, I think we're ready. Everyone's ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's begin.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Marian, as you know it, and I am going to present about my U.S. history portfolio. First, the overview of the unit. We studied about towards the Civil War, and two of the major topics I learned was the economic differences between the North and the South, and slave system of the American South. History. What did I learn? First, we will talk about the economic differences between the North and the South. So, Northern economy based their economy in trading, shipping, banking, farming, factories, and small livestock. Meanwhile, the Southern economy based their economy in cotton plantations, slavery, and tobacco fields. How is this knowledge important to my understanding of this topic? I understood about the slavery system and the Missouri Compromise after learning this. So, what is slavery system? Slavery system is what and how Southerns treated slaves. We will talk about that later after we talk about the Missouri Compromise. Missouri Compromise is this. This is an example. So it's blurry, but states formed by Missouri Compromise is this part right here. Free states are this, and slave states are this. It is divided, so the North has no slaves. Meanwhile, the South has legalized slavery. It is divided by the 3630 line, and it was made by Henry Clay. What did I learn? History knowledge number 2 is the slave system of the South. What is the slave system of the South? So, it helped me understand about abolitionists, how abolition happened, and also what are the treatments of the Southerns to the slaves. I learned that slaves were whipped, lashed, without even appropriate reason, or sometimes when their mistresses or masters just think that they did something wrong. And abolition. Abolitionists were, of course, they made abolition. So, what is abolition? It is when they tried to stop slavery. Abolitionists were commonly Northerners who think that slavery is evil. And then some are runaway slaves. One example of a runaway slave was Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is a girl who escaped from Maryland, and they tried to catch her, but they couldn't. And she helped escape like thousands of slaves. Skills. In this unit, I developed the skill of describing slavery conditions in the South, American South to be specific. It can help me in my classes. How? Because describing slavery, well, it's an example of describing. So if you know how to describe something or a happening, then you'll be able to apply it to your other classes too. One example is in chemistry class. If you know how to describe, like physical properties, chemical properties, you will know your unknown substance. History skill number 2 is identifying appropriate evidence and analyze them to support an argument. When did I do this? We did this in controversial structure, academic controversial structure. I don't know, sorry. So, we did this there. So, remember that we had this blue packet with divided evidence, one that supports slavery and one that doesn't. I didn't support slavery in that time, and by identifying appropriate evidence, I was able to state what I support, and I was able to support my ideas too. If I know how to do this, then in the future, in making thesis, it will help me, because to prove your thesis, you need an evidence. Support it. History skill number 2. It can help me improve in finding and identifying the right evidence to prove a statement. Another thing that is written here is it will help me in further analyzing in future projects and critical thinking. I already explained that in thesis. Portfolios. You need evidence to prove your thesis, to support your idea, and to analyze them. Next one. English development skill number 1 is that I improved in using reading strategies and understanding text. I put a picture here saying that predict, visualize, connect, question, clarify, and evaluate. If you know how to do this, then you will understand your context. You will understand more complex reading. And if you can do that when you go to college, then you'll understand the lessons and you won't have complications. As explained, being able to use reading strategies will help me understand reading guides about our lessons. And it will also improve my vocabulary, and it will help me understand complex text. Complex is another word for complicated. English development skill number 2, I improved in writing, organizing paragraphs that include appropriate structure, evidence, and analysis. When did we do that? Every time we do notes to review what we learned in history class, we always write a summary afterwards. So this actually helps me in my essay today, because if I didn't know how to do that, then I wouldn't know anything. It helps me to understand what we learned, and it helps me improve my English, grammar, spelling, and punctuations. Conclusion. In conclusion, this semester in U.S. history has changed me because it had helped me learn how to improve my grammar, how to improve my English, how to do a thesis statement. It also helped me learn about the history of America. And I need to learn that because now I live here. And being part of a nation of another country is a part of it. Like, you need to know the history to build the pride in you. So, yes. Questions?
Anyone can start. Let's hear one question from everyone, please. You can ask your own question about what she said, or you can ask a question on here.
So you started was about poetry what? So can you explain the background and consequences of the Missouri Compromise?
Missouri Compromise. So the Missouri Compromise was created by Henry Clay. It is to balance the South and the North, because South wanted slavery. Meanwhile, Northerns didn't want it. So to have peace, they needed to balance everything, to separate everything, as explained 3639. It was longitude and latitude. So to balance everything and to have a peaceful country, no war, they needed a compromise. So the consequences, they were separated from each other. They're United States, but they're not united really. And then, so if there was slavery in South and there was wage workers in Northerns, there's a difference in how they depend on their economy, and there's a difference in their lifestyles. So afterwards, the Civil War, when Civil War happened, the South failed. Like every plantations, because it was run by slaves. So they were not since slaves were free afterwards, they failed because they needed to hire new workers, they need to pay them, and slaves didn't want to go back to the South. Meanwhile, the North, still normal, but now they have freed men.
Explain how the Fugitive Slave Act affect the slave debate.
Can you repeat that?
Explain how the Fugitive Slave Act affect the slave debate.
Oh, Fugitive Slave Act. So, Fugitive Slave Act. It affected the slave debate because it's like, so the Fugitive Slave Act is like capturing the slaves, right? So what did they do? They described the slave. They were not specific. Like this one, I have a slave that ran away, a black with this black hair, tall, just like that. They were not descriptive enough to capture a specific slave. So they will just get a new one and then give it to them and they have a price. How did it affect the slave debate? So it just shows us that slavery is not good and that they were not really treated right. So there was discrimination. So it makes us think that we're not supposed to support the slaves. Oh no, wait, the wrong one. We're not supposed to support slavery like that.
How did the slavery system of the African American South affect the economy?
So I told you guys that earlier. Before the Civil War, they ran plantations of tobacco and cotton. And South was literally just about slavery, run by slaveholders. So when it was after the Civil War, since slaves became free, they didn't work in plantations because before that they were forced to work. So now that they weren't working in Souths, like the economy was affected to, like it slowly came down. Like it slowly failed. Like from here it went down, 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 and down. So it was affected greatly. It was not a good effect.
How okay? How were the economies in the north different from the south? The first one. How were the economies in the north different from the south?
Okay, the north had banking, shipbuilding, fur trading, farms, small livestock. So meanwhile, just like what I talked about earlier, South had slaves to run plantations and to be auctioned. So the difference is that North depended on wage workers. They were fair. Meanwhile, the South depended on slaves to like be forced to work. So that's the difference. Wage workers in the North, slavery in the South.
I asked already.
Okay, I have one more question. Can you explain how the Kansas-Nebraska Act affect the slave debate?
Kansas-Nebraska Act. So, Kansas-Nebraska Act. So, if I'm correct, it was about either one of the states becoming a slave state. Am I right? Okay, so I think so just basing on that, I think that it affected the slave debate because it changes our perspective. So it was wrong, it was unbalanced, so it became like, it changed our perspective to slavery is not good, slavery is not good, slavery is really not good. Like it made us think of slavery worse and like, yeah, changes our perspective.
Question from Shawan or from Alex?
What when
I don't know.
is the
Abolition.
Abolitions Lincoln's the readers on the
The
last one.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln.
Here,
What when Abraham Lincoln's raised on the
Access
of read server on the
and
server and the user. The last one.
What were
I
Abraham
don't have
Lincoln's
questions
views?
here.
Yeah,
Well,
what were Abraham Lincoln's views on the issues of race, slavery, and the median?
Oh, so Abraham Lincoln's views in race and the other words before after that is that it is not good. He disagrees with it, but when he's in the North, he tells that to the people so that they will vote for him. Meanwhile, when he's in the South, he says that slavery is good. It's not bad. So you should vote for me. But in his personal thinking, slavery is not good, and he tried to stop it.
Strong one.
Why was Africa's American statement capitalists enslaved in the United States?
Can you repeat?
Why were African Americans systematically enslaved in the United States?
Systematically.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to another history part of the United States. We know that slaves came from Africa when Europe took over the United States, and then whites became free. They beat those Europeans, and then African Americans were left there. How were they systematically enslaved?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
In the United States.
Why? Because of discrimination, based on my opinion. Because most people, even until now, that they think they base on your skin color. So if you're white, you're different from blacks, you're better than blacks, just like that. They think like that. And they didn't really learn anything from back then. They didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to write, so where would they go? So they were forced to work in plantations, even if they were not paid. They didn't have family, they were auctioned. They just had the family of slaves that were like co-workers, just like that.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you. So, man, if you can go outside for a minute. Do you have a pencil or a pen? Do you need one? Okay. Thank you. Okay, you can go outside for a minute. We will tell you when to come in. Just write down some notes, please. And everyone else, if you can take one of these. Take one of these, please, and take one of these. Let's write down a few notes on clarification.
That's one of the